Hi students, and welcome to lesson 6. We're going to be starting the cardiovascular system in this lesson, but we're really going to be focusing on the heart. So the cardiovascular system is not just the heart, and in lesson 7 we really focus on the various arteries, veins, capillaries, and blood vessels. We're really going to focus on the heart in this lesson though. Obviously the major function of the cardiovascular system is transportation using blood, but it doesn't just transfer blood around. It also can transfer around things like hormones, waste, different proteins, nutrients that can go in and out of the cells to help maintain homeostasis. So here's the gross anatomy of the heart, and this is what we're going to be really kind of honing in on, not just the outside, but the inside as well. So your heart is approximately the size of your fist. It's a very light organ because without blood in it, it's a very hollow organ. It's enclosed by what we call the mediastinum and is basically flanked on each side of your lungs. It's really in the center of your chest, and I think that's a big misconception because when we're doing the national anthem, we're kind of placing our hand more on the right side of the chest, but the heart is really in the middle of the chest. And then the apex is going to be the pointed bottom of the heart, and it's going to be pointed towards the left hip, and it rests on that diaphragm muscle. So we need to talk about what surrounds your heart. First, the major kind of hard outer covering is going to be called the pericardium. And the pericardium is going to be a double-walled kind of sac that encloses the heart. The outer portion of this pericardium is going to be what we call the fibrous pericardium. And anytime you see that word fibrous, you know it's going to be kind of a tough connective tissue covering. And then deeper to that is going to be your serous pericardium, which is going to be a serous membrane. And this is also going to be double layered. First, you're going to have your parietal layer, and then your visceral layer. The visceral layer is what's actually going to be touching the heart, and it's part of the heart wall. We refer to it as the epicardium. But really what you need to understand is you have this fibrous pericardium, which is really tough connective tissue. Then you have that serous membrane, which basically allows serous fluid to go between that parietal and visceral layer, so you don't have any friction when your heart is beating. So the heart wall, so this is actually what the heart is made of, is composed of 3 layers. And the outermost layer is that epicardium, what we just talked about, that visceral layer of the serous membrane. Your middle layer is going to be the myocardium, which is really thick bundles of cardiac muscle. Your heart really is a muscular organ, and you need to remember that it's cardiac muscle. And this is your layer that's actually contracting. And remember, anytime you see that word myo, it's going to mean muscle. So see muscle, myo, that's going to mean muscle. And then your innermost layer is going to be the endocardium, which is just a really thin layer of epithelium that's going to line the inside of your heart chambers. So if we take a look, here is the fibrous pericardium. That's going to be your outermost portion. That's going to be a really hard, tough connective tissue layer. And then these layers here is going to be the serous membrane. And you can see that there is a cavity right here, and that's where the serous fluid is going to flow through. Here's your myocardium, that really thick layer of cardiac muscle, and then your innermost layer is going to be the endocardium, which is this nice thin layer of epithelial tissue lining the inside of the heart. So now we're going to move on to the chambers. Your heart has 4 chambers. We are a 4-chambered organism, a lot like our other mammals. And it's going to be lined with the endocardium. You have 4 chambers. 2 of them are going to be atria. 2 of them are going to be ventricles. Your top chambers, so the chambers that are most superior, are going to be your atria. They are going to be your receiving chambers, so they're going to be receiving blood from vessels entering into the heart. And then your ventricles are going to be the bottom chambers, and these are the ones that are really using that thick myocardium to contract and push blood out of the heart. So if we look here, you're going to have a right atrium and a left atrium. Atria is plural, atrium is singular. And then you're going to have your ventricles. So you have a right ventricle, which is going to be on the bottom, and then you're going to have a left ventricle. So these top chambers here are your atria. And remember, it would be like you're looking at somebody, so it's going to be opposite. So this may be your left side over here, but it's really the right side of the heart because you're looking at it like it's in a patient. So here's your right atrium, left atrium. Then you have your right ventricle and your left ventricle. Ventricles are bottom chambers. Your interventricular septum is going to be the area that kind of divides the heart into your left and right sides. And really, the heart is a double pump. The right and the left sides are going to be actually propelling blood into different areas. And on the right side of the heart, you're going to have blood entering into the heart from what we call the superior and inferior vena cava, which are super large veins. And it's going to pump out of the right side of the heart through what we call the pulmonary arteries, which go to the lungs. So let's go ahead and kind of trace the pathway of blood starting at that right side of the heart, just looking at chambers and vessels. So first we have the superior and inferior vena cava. So these are going to be huge veins that are bringing oxygen-poor blood to the right side of the heart. From the vena cava, it's going to enter into this right atrium. It's going to flow into the right ventricle, and then it's going to be shot up in through that right ventricle into the pulmonary arteries. You have a left and a right one right here. And the reason you have a left and a right is because these actually are going to travel to the lungs where your blood is going to get oxygen. So that's really how it travels through the right side of the heart. The left side of the heart is where blood returning from the lungs is going to enter into. So it's going to enter into the left side of the heart through what we call pulmonary veins, and then it's going to leave the heart through the aorta, which is this giant, huge blood vessel artery that's going to then take all of that oxygenated blood to all of your body tissues. So let's go ahead and trace the left side of the heart just using vessels and the chambers. So your blood is going to enter into the left side of the heart through these veins right here. You have left pulmonary veins, and you also have right pulmonary veins because it's coming back from the lungs, and you have lungs on both sides. You have a lung over here and a lung over here. And it's going to enter into the left atria. It's going to travel into the left ventricle, and then your oxygenated blood is going to be shot up into this aorta, which is a huge, huge, huge artery. And then it's going to go to all of your body tissues where we can dump off oxygen. So we just kind of talked about how there's two different kind of pumps in your heart. There's a right and a left side. And they're really going to have kind of a different role in looking at different circulations. So first let's talk about pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation is the flow of blood from the right side of the heart to the lungs and then back to the left side of the heart. So I always remember it as heart, lungs, heart is going to be your pulmonary circulation. And then for your systemic circulation, that's going to be blood going from the left side of the heart to the body tissues where it dumps off oxygen and picks up carbon dioxide, and then back to the right side of the heart. So your pulmonary circulation is going to be heart, lungs, heart. Systemic is going to be heart, body tissues, heart. So if we look here, here's our pulmonary circuit. Our pulmonary circuit is going to be deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart going to the lungs back to the left side of the heart. So we have heart, lungs, heart. And then the systemic circuit is going to be blood that is oxygenated on that left side, traveling to body tissues where we dump off gases or exchange gases, and then traveling back to the right side of the heart. So it's heart, body tissues, heart. So between these different chambers, we have different valves, and you have 4 chambers and you have 4 valves. You have what are called your AV valves, or atrioventricular valves. These are the valves that separate the atria from the ventricles. See how they name those for you, atrioventricular? So these are going to separate, for example, your right atrium from your right ventricle, or your left atrium from your left ventricle. And particularly, you have what's called the bicuspid valve. This is going to be your left AV valve, so separating the left and right, the left atrium and the left ventricle. And then your tricuspid valve is going to separate your right atrium from your right ventricle. And how you can remember when looking at the blood flow through the heart, how you can remember which is first. One of my students said that they always thought of try before you buy. So the tricuspid's on the right side and the bicuspid is on the left. So try before you buy. And then they have chordae tendineae. These are actually interesting. These are heartstrings, how I always remember them. And these are little cords, little connective tissue cords that are actually anchoring these atrioventricular valves onto the ventricles. All right, so if we look here, these are our AV valves. There's 1, there is 2. This is the tricuspid, so you can see it's separating the right atrium from the right ventricle. And then over here is your bicuspid valve, which is separating the left atrium from the left ventricle. And then these strings here, those are the chordae tendineae, the heartstrings that are actually anchoring those valves down to the ventricles. All right, and then your other 2 valves are called semilunar valves, and you have one that is separating the right ventricle from the pulmonary arteries. That's called the pulmonary semilunar valve. And then the aortic semilunar valve is separating the left ventricle from the aorta. And how I always kind of remember these is they're little like flaps that open and close. I always think of it as a ketchup bottle. So when you want to squeeze out ketchup, you have to squeeze the ketchup bottle and you're building pressure inside the ketchup bottle. And once you build enough pressure from squeezing that ketchup bottle, it forces ketchup out of that little valve on the cap. This is exactly the same. You're actually building enough pressure in the ventricles that when they contract, it forces blood through these valves, just kind of like a ketchup bottle does. So here is your pulmonary semilunar valve. It's separating the right ventricle from the pulmonary arteries. And then the aortic semilunar valve is kind of hidden, but it's right here, and it's separating the left ventricle from the aorta. So what we're going to do here in the last 2 minutes of this lecture is trace the pathway of blood through the heart. And I want you to write these out. It's a little hard for me to do that on here, but I really want you guys to write it out. So do like a 1 and a 2 and a 3, and write it out and follow along with me. So the first structure is going to be right here. That is going to be your superior and inferior vena cava. Blood is then going to travel into the right atrium, where it travels through, right here, the tricuspid valve, remember try before you buy, into the right ventricle. It's going to be then shot up through the pulmonary semilunar valve into our 6th structure, which is the pulmonary arteries. Our 7th structure is actually going to be the lungs, because that's where it's going to travel to, the lungs. It's going to come back from the lungs in this structure here, which are your pulmonary veins. In your pulmonary veins, it's going to enter into the left atrium, travel through the bicuspid valve, that is structure 10, into the left ventricle, that's going to be structure 11. It's going to be then shot up through the aortic semilunar valve, that is structure 12. Then it's going to travel into the aorta. And finally, our structure 14 is going to be body tissues, where we dump off that gas. So what I would like you to do is really watch this again, label your heart, and label your pathway. All right, thanks for watching.